Hey folks, this is Kalani. Patch 7.1.5 finally went up onto the PTR, so we get to see some of the changes planned for the very first patch, which is going to make, really big changes to talents, classes, all that good stuff. So, Marksman Hunter changes seem to have everybody in a little bit of an uproar, and we're going to discuss why, because it's a little bit frustrating and quite justified right now, I would feel, because they're taking a lot of what Marksman Hunter were complaining about in the beta, which they kind of fixed a little bit, and then we're going back to something even clunkier. So right now, if you don't know how Marksman Hunter works, I'll go through that really quickly because people didn't understand why we were so angry. We were like, so you're going to be a little bit lower on DPS? No, this literally breaks how Marksmanship Hunter works right now. So if you don't know, we'll go through it quickly so you can understand why everyone's so angry. So, to do any damage, we rely on a proc called Marking Targets. Now that comes from auto shots. That is quite random. Now typically your first shot in combat is going to give you it, simply because of how procs work, but after that, it's all up in the air. You can go quite a long while without having any procs. So, this proc lets us put Hunter's Mark on the target, which then allows us to use Marked Shot. Now, Marked Shot applies Vulnerable. Now, this stacks twice to give us 100% increased damage on most of our abilities. So, you need to stack it twice and keep it stacked. Now, that's actually incredibly terrible, so we always go for the Patient Sniper talent. This changes that Vulnerable debuff to 150%, but only for 6 seconds. Now, the reason why this is kind of a no-brainer is because it gives us extra focus, which lets us pull more focus to get more aim shots off, but we can only get a certain amount of aim shots off due to our focus limit anyway. Most of those aim shots would be inside this 6-second window of Vulnerable, so there's no point not using that talent because that's kind of what we have to deal with. May as well get that 50% extra damage on the window where we can actually use aim shots instead of just picking our butt for the other time when we can't actually make use of the Vulnerable buff. Now, the other thing is that this is complete RNG. Outside of this one proc, we have no way to apply this Vulnerable. So to change that, we take sidewinders. Now, sidewinders does two things. The first thing, as I mentioned, is that it itself applies Vulnerable, and it also replaces Arcane Shot and Multi-Shot. Now, you probably heard people complain about this because sidewinders is really weird, and it just kind of hits everything anywhere somewhat near your target. But it does apply Vulnerable to everything it hits. Now, we still rely on that proc, but when we get that proc, two things happen. We get the Marking Targets, and we also get Vulnerable, meaning that that Marked Shot, which we then use to apply our next Vulnerable window, also deals the 150% extra damage from Patient Sniper. That would not happen if we could not apply Vulnerable with Sidewinders. Now, the second thing that Sidewinders does is it actually generates more focus with a single global cooldown, allowing us to use more global cooldowns for aim shot. So, what's happened is quite a few bits and pieces of this rotation have changed. Over on the PTR, we have the changes that we currently have to work with. The first one is that Patient Sniper is now baseline, and Patient Sniper has changed. But it's not baseline the way it was. We don't have the extra focus from it, which means we're capped at 120 instead of 150, and it's now 100% for 7 seconds instead of 150% for 6 seconds, meaning that if you just took this one change, we're already seeing a huge nerf to our damage because that 50% is just taken off the top, which is frustrating. But then we also have Sidewinders. Sidewinders no longer applies Vulnerable. Now, this is a bigger nerf than what it may seem like on the surface because, as I said before, we Sidewinders to apply that Marking Targets, but it's not Vulnerable. We then Marked Shot, and that Marked Shot is never going to hit a vulnerable target in that situation, meaning that's just damage decimated off of Marked Shot, which hasn't received any changes to itself. So that's just lost damage on top of lost damage of it being 100% instead of 150%. Now, Patient Sniper has changed to increase the damage bonus of Vulnerable every 1 second. Now, we have a 2-second cast time, give or take, with aim shot, meaning we're only really going to benefit from every second tick of this. But that means that we get up to 190, I believe it is. So we'll throw out Marked Shot, we can track Vulnerable, you can see it goes up 130, 145, 160, 175, and 190 for the very last second. So after a few seconds, that does get higher than what we have right now. The problem is that we are then expected to hit an aim shot on the very last, 0.5 seconds of this new Vulnerable to get a damage increase out of it. Or we can just use 3 aim shots. Now, the problem with 3 aim shots is that unless we take lock and load, we don't get that many aim shots out. So we get aim shot, and this is focus cap. We wait for the next one, and Vunerable's pretty much gone. So to get that perfect every time, I think people smarter than me have figured it out to be about 23% haste, meaning every marksmanship hunter would then need to change all of their stat priorities to get at least that 23% haste, and then stack whatever it is after. Currently, our stat priorities are mastery, haste, crit, versatility, kind of in that order. Haste and crit are somewhat together. You know, haste is better when you have more crit, crit's better when you have more haste, and overall it just seems to be a really terrible change, and it's going to make a clunky class even clunkier for less payoff, which definitely isn't what we want to see. But we also can't use sidewinders because it doesn't apply vulnerable, so we have to change that to trick shot, which means we're back to spamming aim shot, which again just doesn't feel awesome. So as you can see, with all these changes stacked one on top of the other, things really don't look great for Marksmanship Hunter, which was pretty much the best hunter spec if you didn't want to be the special snowflake melee hunter, which means that everybody's pretty much done all of their gearing, all of their artifact power into marksmanship, and if these changes go ahead, I don't think marksmanship will be as viable. So we might have to do something else, or potentially re-roll, because BM isn't really up there, and survival isn't really up there, so we're looking at a class with 3 not so great DPS specs, which obviously isn't what you want to bring to a raid. Now, the biggest problem with this, honestly, is that nothing really has been given back. Right? We've lost damage pretty much left, right, and center. The only thing which has been increased is aim shot, which is nice, but we're still losing damage overall, and it's getting clunkier and kind of less enjoyable to play, and more RNG based, which nobody really cares for. So that's pretty much why the changes suck, and what we would have to do to get any damage out of our Marksmanship Hunter come 7.1.5 if this does happen. It's frustrating to say the least. We'll see what happens. Obviously it is the first pass of 7.1.5 and hopefully things will change, but from what things happened in beta, I mean, we're complaining a lot about how the current playstyle was already playing and then they kind of broke it more. So we'll see what happens. We'll definitely see what happens. I'm hoping that we get damage elsewhere. We have a few of these changes either reverted or changed to work better and have a different playstyle, ideally, but we will see. That's Marksmanship Hunter changes and why they suck, pretty much, and obviously why we're complaining. So if you have any questions or queries, please leave them in the comment section below and I'll try to get back to you. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.